The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army.
Breaking news, Kamala Harris is out. According to Politico and NPR, she has announced on a call today that she didn't have the resources necessary to continue, and so her campaign is ended. This actually broke as I was getting ready to push publish on today's podcast, and it's important news. So I will talk about it more at the end of this episode. I don't think it's going to be as big of a shakeup as people think, but I want to pick up where we left off yesterday about this middle class squeeze, because I think it is critical for the movement right now. Now, the actual definition of the middle class squeeze is the situation where increases in wages fail to keep up with inflation for middle income earners, leading to a relative decline in real wages. Yeah, I took that straight from Wikipedia. So that's the precise definition of it. But I think there's a better usage of that phrase. I think the best usage of that phrase is to describe the situation where you believe that you're middle class and society is telling you that you're middle class. But what actually happens is after you get done paying federal income taxes, you make just enough to be in that 42% that pay federal income taxes, but you get no benefit from it. And because of that, you find yourself in a situation where you're actually worse off than some people who are in the working class. Now, worse off is relative. And I know there's a lot of people who are probably going to yell at the computer and say, I would love to make $100,000 a year for a household of four. But I can tell you from personal experience being poor that when you are poor and you actually don't make anything and you're dirt poor, like for real, you get actual benefits. You can get Medicaid for your kids. You can get assistance of some type. It's not much. It's degrading. It's a painful situation, but you at least have a safety net. People who are in this middle class squeeze, you make good enough money to pay taxes, but you make too much money to get any benefit. And you, my friends, fall into that category where you can't afford a $400 emergency. You can't afford to go to the hospital. You can't afford, there's nothing there for you. There's no safety net there for you. You know what your taxes are. I'm talking specifically to the people who make so much money that they pay taxes, but not enough money that they actually can get ahead. You know where your federal income taxes are going at the end of every year? To war. Mayor Pete, along with all the other Republicans, is trying to convince you that if you make over $100,000 a year for a family of four, that should be the cutoff for college for all. When in reality, you are just as vulnerable as someone who's making $50,000 a year for a household of four. What I think is extremely critical is that we dispel with this notion that because you make six figures a year that you're actually doing good. Because what happens is, it's important for two reasons, but I just want to start by saying this. What happens is that you are fooled into having class solidarity with people who make more money than you will ever make in your lifetime in 10 lifetimes. Because you're making $250,000 a year, you think you have more in common with a billionaire. Why? Because you can go to the same club as a billionaire. You can go to the same place to have brunch as a billionaire. The thing is, they take like 0.0000001% of their wealth and pay and buy out the entire bar. And while you are like, have to check your account and make sure that you can cover your $200 tab. But we've created a lifestyle in this country. This lifestyle, somebody can describe it much better. I'm just going to give you what I think it is. And I'm sure there's a lot of literature around it. That's really how my show operates. I have intuition. I am well read in my field of international relations, but there's so many other topics that we cover. And I know there's a lot of literature out there. I encourage you to go find it. But as I see it, I see it that there's a psychological problem in this country where we feel wealthy, even though we're not wealthy whatsoever. And then that feeling of wealthiness makes us have solidarity with people that we have nothing in common with whatsoever. There is not a reason for someone who's making less than $500,000 a year to not be on board completely with Medicare for all and college for all, particularly college for all. And no, actually, I'm sorry, both Medicare for all and college for all. I know there's a lot of people with really good plans that gives them unbelievable access to the healthcare industry. But the fact is that there's more people in the world than you and your family. And for the most part, your taxes, the dollars that you pay at the end of every year, they're going to nothing but endless wars. So why would you not contribute to a system that's going to make sure that everybody can get access to health care? I'm sorry, I hate that phrase. Can absolutely get the coverage that they need, the treatment that they need. But back to the main point, the middle class squeeze, you're in it. I don't care how much you can stunt. I don't care how much you can floss. I don't care how many brunches you can do. I don't care how many times you can pretend like you're buying out the bar, right? There's this entire mindset of people who feel wealthy when you're really not. And that's cool. There's nothing wrong with that, except for when you end up having class solidarity with people who you don't have the same economic interests with. You are not a millionaire. In fact, if you're not worth $32 million with Bernie Sanders' plan or $50 million with Elizabeth Warren's plan, then you have no business supporting anyone but the two of them. I mean, are you worth $32 million? Not, I mean, obviously you don't make that a year, but are you worth 32 million? Are you worth 50 million? Then the wealth tax is not going to hit you. But what happens is exactly what Mayor Peter is playing to. What happens is that he's trying to make you feel separate from the working class. He's going to create a wedge like Republicans always do, like Democrats have done. They create a wedge between the middle class and the working class, when in reality, there's no distinction. I mean, seriously, if you make $500,000 a year, you in American society, you're considered rich. But in terms of the actual rich people in this world, you're working class. We have to expand this class solidarity to include everyone who's not actually damn near a billionaire. I mean, there's some 100 millionaires that out there that, yeah, okay, they're rich. You know, $50 million, you're wealthy. But if you're living based on your income, not based on wealth, if you derive your wealth based on income and labor and wages versus capital gains, if the bulk of your income does not come from capital gains, you're not wealthy. And you have more in common with someone who makes $30,000 a year than you do with someone who makes $100,000 a year off of capital gains alone. Let me translate that more just in case I don't want to confuse anybody. Someone who makes $100,000 a year off the interest of the money that they have in the bank. And that's nothing. That's nothing. I mean, you have people who are clearing $500,000, $1 million a year just in interest on their wealth. So if you actually have to go to work, my dude, you're not rich. You are doing good. There are a lot of people who would love to be in your shoes, but the reality of it is that you are the exact target that this country is making money off of, and they're spending that money to go to war instead of sending your kids to college for free or providing you with free health care. They're going to tax the hell out of you, but you're going to get no benefit from it.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
It is time for our patron party. Thank you for everyone who is a patron, but a special thank you to Kimberly Dulligan. I'm so sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Thank you for becoming a patron. And a special shout out to Jordan Smalls. Thank you for becoming a patron. And last but not least, to all of the patrons who came back. Like, there's at least, I don't know, about 6 of you who came back. Patreon doesn't tell me who you are. I just saw the increase in our numbers. So thank you for becoming a patron. We can't do it without you. You too can become a part of this prestigious and prodigious family by going to www.patreon.com/the BPD show. And once you become a patron, be sure to go to our Discord. There's a link in our Patreon network that will take you to our Discord. Join our Discord where we hang out, talk about anything and everything, any time of day or night. Okay, I'm going to come back to the class solidarity conversation in a moment. I want to go over a couple of other things that's happening in the news, particularly the polling coming out of the early primary states. The first choice in early primary states, according to the Morning Consult polling, has Joe Biden at 25. I can never pronounce Biden. I say Biden or something ridiculous. Joe Biden is at 25%. He went down a point. Bernie Sanders is at 20%. He went down 3 points. Remember that, 3 points. Buttigieg is up 1 point at 13%. Elizabeth Warren had the biggest drop. She is down to 12%, losing 6 points. Steyer, why is he even in it? 9%. He's up 2. Gabbard, Tulsi Gabbard is at 4%, and she is up 3 points. Now, of course, there's never going to be a 1-to-1. We can't say that Gabbard took those 3 points from Bernie Sanders, but we can't say that she didn't. Kamala Harris, 4%. She's up 2 points. Yang is down 1 point at 3%. Bloomberg has 2 points. Booker is at 2%. Klobuchar is at 2%. Folks, listen, there's movement from Warren to Buttigieg. Remember what I told you. I told you that Warren and Sanders are not substitutes. In fact, one survey recently showed that that Joe Biden supporters' second pick is actually Bernie Sanders. Now, admittedly, the conversation has changed with the help of a lot of us who are letting you know that this has been the case and this is the case. It's not just a gut feeling. We were looking at the data that Elizabeth Warren wasn't the target. The target always needed to be particularly Joe Biden because of his stranglehold, the Democratic establishment stranglehold, and because there's no real loyalty to Joe Biden beyond the thought that he can beat Donald Trump. Joe Biden only went down 1 point. Tulsi Gabbard went up 3 points. And I told you these races are going to come down to the smallest percentages. The smallest percentages. Those 4 points that Tulsi Gabbard has. I mean, at this rate, Warren is probably going to be out of the running pretty soon. Those 4 points that Tulsi Gabbard has absolutely would go to Bernie Sanders. And the thing is that the way Tulsi's squad is actually manipulating this thing is that they want you to feel like supporting Tulsi is supporting Bernie. Supporting Bernie is supporting Tulsi. It literally does not work like that. It actually works the exact opposite of that. Tulsi Gabbard is in the perfect position to sandbag Bernie Sanders. If you take those 4 points from Gabbard, they're probably within the margin of error anyway, but that would give Bernie Sanders the boost that he needs to be leading it all. All of it. All of it. And you still have commentators. I'll talk about Jimmy Dore later because of something else. But you have commentators who are pushing this narrative that supporting Tulsi Gabbard is the same as supporting Bernie Sanders because they're colleagues at arms, right? They're brothers in arms, whatever. That's not the case. Tulsi Gabbard is perfectly suited to mess this entire thing up. And on the flip side, where we have to put our energy in terms of not getting an establishment shill, like Buttigieg, like Joe Biden, is by continuously hammering them. Not only because it's the smart thing to do politically, but because it's the right thing to do morally based on their arguments. Their arguments are morally inept, bereft. They have no ground to stand on. But people are more convinced. Two things. People are more convinced that Joe Biden can beat Donald Trump, which is wrong. But then, two, the argument that I made in the last episode and in the first part of this episode is that people have this misconception in their mind that they're actually doing better than they are. And that they look at Bernie Sanders has wrapped himself as being a working class champion. I mean, the reality of it is his programs are going to help that middle class way more than it's going to help the working class. It absolutely is, especially based on who's paying taxes. And so I think the conversation needs to start shifting more to being that Bernie Sanders and hell, even Elizabeth Warren, because at the end of the day, if you ask me out of all of these people, who would I want? Bernie Sanders, number one, Elizabeth Warren, number two. Everybody else, none of them. I don't want any of them. But what's getting ready to happen is that Gabbard is getting ready to sandbag us, and we're going to end up with Joe Biden, who's absolutely going to lose. But to stop all that from happening, what we absolutely must do is to hammer the fact that Joe Biden is not electable. But then we need to add to the conversation that these programs are going to help the middle class more than anybody else. And if you actually have time to have the conversation with them, you need to help them to understand that there's really no such thing as the middle class. You either make your living off your labor or you make your living off of your capital. And if you're making your living off of labor, I don't care if you're a doctor, a pilot, or a lawyer, you should be supporting Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren at the bare minimum.
£10,000 for a baby.
Is there a price for that?
Yes.
Jeez, $100? $200?
$2,500. Ambulance call out. How much do you think that costs?
Zero payment.
Zero payment?
Yeah, zero payment.
No. Because $2,500.
For real?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
you look. An inhaler.
$100.
Yeah, you're pretty close. It's a bit more.
120.
250 to 350.
For an inhaler?
Yes.
Man, so if you're poor, you're dead.
Yeah, if you're poor, you're dead. That was audio from Joe Politics on Twitter. He is at Joe Politics _UK. And he was interviewing Londoners on the street and trying to get their best estimate of what it costs to get, I don't know, the different, medical attention here in the United States. They started off with a baby, and the lady was like $10,000 for a baby. Yeah, that's actually kind of cheap, to be honest with you. An inhaler, the cost of insulin. British people have no point of reference to the barbarity of the system that we have here in the United States. But if they're not careful with the upcoming elections, Boris Johnson of the Conservative Party is looking to sell off the NHS, their version of what we would call Medicare for all, to the vultures here in the United States, versus Jeremy-Corbin, the Labour Party, who is obviously pushing to not only keep the NHS, but fund it even better. But the reason I'm playing that clip is because we are so far behind in this country, and the biggest difficulty in helping the people to understand why is it that why don't we have here in the United States what the UK has? It's because people don't believe we actually deserve it. Germany has long had free college education for all. Hell, there are students from the United States who go to Germany to get free education. And why don't we have it here in the United States? Because we don't think we deserve it. And then because there's class animus, there's a false stratification of classes here in the United States where people think that they're doing better than they actually are. And then those people who think that they're doing better than they actually are look down on the people who don't have, especially when those people who think that they're doing better than they actually are come to terms with the fact that they're not doing that good. When they realize at the end of the year they don't have any money left over. When they realize at the end of the year that they can't afford to go see the doctor for their chest pains. And they look at somebody who can go because they're so poor that they're on Medicaid. And they're like, oh, it's a handout. It's welfare. The people who... Anyway, but the point is, I'm going to finish that conversation in a minute. But I just had to play that clip because, man, we are living in the most barbaric country imaginable. And let's not even talk about American imperialism and the true barbarism of this country. But just the way we treat ourselves. How could you expect us to treat anybody else better than we treat ourselves? And we treat ourselves pretty much like indentured servants, and we're proud. Like, the patriotic thing to do in this country is to be proud of how much you allow this capitalistic system to rape you. The rest of the world is looking at us like, what is wrong with America?
And finally, new rule. Someone has to explain, if our economy is doing so great, how come everyone is broke? To me, the real lesson of this government shutdown is that we found out that federal workers, quintessential middle-class jobs, can't afford to miss one paycheck. I must have seen 100 stories about furloughed workers that look like this.
I literally don't know how I'm going to provide for my kids.
Furloughed interior worker Mallory Lorg rationing her insulin.
First off, I can't pay my mortgage.
It's a matter of life and death for me.
And it's more proof that the great American middle class is disappearing faster than R. Kelly's Facebook friends.
I mean, these are facts, right? These are facts. Okay, so this is what this is based on Pew Research. This is what's considered middle class. And I want you to really, really think about how you live based on these numbers. Let's take a state like Florida. If you make $26,226, then you are considered lower income. If you make $75,000, you're considered middle income. If you make $188,000, you're considered upper income. Here's the problem. At $188,000 in Florida, unless you're living in the boondocks, you're struggling. You are literally struggling. And that's the thing, man. We really the cost of living has outpaced all of our salaries. Bottom line, there was a time where if you made $26,000 a year, you were doing great in America. And I guess coming full circle, the real definition of middle class squeeze actually fits this perfectly. It's no longer the case that you can make $150,000 a year and have what a person making $25,000 a year in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s could have. That's because, really simply, the cost of living has outpaced our increases in wages significantly. And the only people who actually thrive in this kind of environment are the ultra wealthy, the extreme wealthy, not somebody who makes $500,000 a year. Listen, I would love to make $500,000 a year. And I guess I'm guilty of this too, man, because I'll be stunting on them hoes. Listen, I'll be stunting on y'all if I was making $500,000 a year. But I wouldn't be stupid enough to actually think that I have more in common with Bill Gates than I do Joe Bob. At the end of the day, our struggles are so similar. I'm trying to give you an example to help you understand, like a person who makes $500,000 a year versus a person who's worth $5 billion. I mean, I have more in common. We have more in common with the person who makes $500,000 a year than that person who makes $500,000 a year has in common with a billionaire any day of the week. But we are so deluded by the false stratification of our society. We get a little bit of money, because most of us are poor. Most of us have been poor all of our lives, and we get a little bit of money, and then all of a sudden we think we're rich. Okay, the reason I'm driving this home so much is because we have to expand class solidarity and realize there is no middle class. There is no middle class in this country. If you have to actually there's labor and there's capital, period. And I know somebody's like, yeah, Ben, this was written by Marx a very long time ago. I know. My job is not to throw around theory to you guys. My job is to make sure that what we talk about is extremely accessible with language that is replicable and usable in talking points format. Because when you have the conversation with your friend who makes $250,000 a year, you need to be able to tell them that they have more in common with somebody who's making $30,000. So they have more in common with the person who's making minimum wage than they do the CEO of their company. And that there's absolutely, literally no reason whatsoever that they should be defending the tax bracket of their boss. And honestly, you need to be able to tell them that they would be the biggest beneficiaries of someone like Bernie Sanders and even Elizabeth Warren. They would be. The people who should be fighting for Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren's Medicare for all and college for all plans the most are the people who think that they're in the middle class, when in reality, America doesn't have a middle class. You either live off of capital or you live off of your labor. So if you go to work to make your check, that includes, listen, Okay, let me make it very, very plain, and then I'll move on to a whole nother topic, because I know I started this yesterday, but I just have to drive this home to give you the language. Doctors. Hello. Doctors. Like lawyers, unless you like own the law firm. And, but doctors and lawyers who in our society, we look at them like, oh, you got money.
Large. You got money. He got money. Get off for him.
The reality of it is that most of them have more in common with people who make minimum wage. Don't get me wrong. They're totally different lifestyles. Yes, listen, we're not going to reduce the differences in the stratification. But in comparison to what we're trying to do with Medicare for all and college for all, you have more in common with someone making minimum wage than you do someone who makes their entire living off of capital gains. And that there's really no reason why you should not be on the front of the lines looking back and saying, hey, I support Bernie Sanders. I support Elizabeth Warren, Medicare for all, college for all. You guys can fight it out about who you like better than the other. I'll let you fight that out in the comment section, right? You all know where I stand. But no, there's no reason whatsoever that the management class, right? Those people who actually think that they are the boss, but they're not. Those people who think that they're rich, but they're still making money off of their labor. They are not capitalists. They don't own capital. Their value is their labor. They should be the ones who say, hey, you're taking taxes from me. Can we get Medicare for all? Can we get college for all? Can we get better usage of the taxes that we're already paying? But what has happened historically, and this is what Pete is doing, I already said it, I'm going to say it again, and then I'll move on. I'll leave it alone. Is that what they do instead is that they continuously tax that group of people who are in the middle class squeeze, and they give them no benefit whatsoever. And what happens? That class of people look down with resentment towards the people who are getting the benefit because they make so little. Because they make so little that they actually can get Medicaid. You see what I'm saying? So the class solidarity has to expand. We have to just be really sober about who is wealthy in this country and who is not. And the truth is if you have to use your labor to make a living, then you have more in common with people who make minimum wage than you do people who make their livelihood off of capital gains. I almost had an aneurysm last night when I saw that Richard Spencer, the preeminent Nazi and white supremacist in our country, shared a video from Jimmy Dore, which is, that's not the problem. But it was a video that Jimmy Dore did 3 years ago about Malcolm X. And Richard Spencer, the preeminent white supremacist Nazi in this country, shared that video. And obviously the subtext is this red-brown alliance that so many people on the right fantasize. So many people on the left fantasize about. Now, you can't control who shares your content. But with a Nazi was approvingly sharing my content, I'd have to take a step back and figure out what the hell am I doing that would make a Nazi agree with me. Well, here's that clip of Malcolm X and a little bit of Dore's commentary.
Well, if Goldwater ever becomes president, one thing his presence in the White House will do, it will make black people in America have to face up to facts, probably for the first time in many, many years. And this in itself is good, in that Goldwater is a man who's not capable of hiding his racist tendencies, and at the same time, he's not capable of even pretending to Negroes that he's their friend. So this will have a tendency to make the Negro, probably for the first time, do something to stand on his own feet and solve his own problem, instead of putting himself in a position to be misled, misused, exploited by the whites who pose as liberals only for the purpose of getting the support of the Negro. So in one sense, Goldwater's coming in will awaken the Negro, and it will probably awaken the entire world more so than the world has been awakened since Hitler.
This is what he's saying. He's saying, beware of the liberals. The liberals like Hillary Clinton, not really a liberal. Be aware of those people. Because they're not really your friend. They're not on your side. They pay, just like Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, they pay fealty to you, traditional Democratic principles, and then they go right on and screw everybody with Republicans.
Okay, now you got to pause and ask yourself the question, why would Richard Spencer, the preeminent white supremacist Nazi, the dapper white supremacist, according to Mother Jones, or the dapper Nazi, I forgot how they phrased it, why would he share this clip? I know exactly why. I just wanted to pause for dramatic effect. The reason he would share this clip is because it is the tool that the Republicans are using right now to encourage self-disenfranchisement amongst black people. And people like Richard Spencer, and I'll get to Jimmy Dore in a minute, but I want to talk about the conservative push that I've been talking about for some time. Their number one tool that they are going to use right now, this year into 2020, what they are going to use is the idea, one of two things, that either Democrats aren't doing anything for us, so you shouldn't vote, or this obscene idea that Donald Trump has done more for us, so that Donald Trump should get our vote, meaning the black vote. This is 100% about suppressing the black vote, and whatever percentage fraction that they can pick off, they'll take it. If they can get 2%, 5%, 10% to vote for Donald Trump, they'll take it, so long as they can get the rest of the black vote to stay home. Now, what Malcolm X was talking about was something totally different. In this case, in this instance, Barry Goldwater, he was saying that Barry Goldwater is absolutely the type of person to reveal what America really is. What Richard Spencer is doing is saying, no, let's take Malcolm X's message and co-opt it to encourage black people to not vote at all. And Jimmy Dore is just a useful idiot to help usher that in. Jimmy Dore used this as an argument to say, oh, Hillary Clinton is not really your friend. And while I agree with one point that he said that Democrats get in and they do the same thing as Republicans, I actually, honestly, you cannot look at this last administration. You cannot look at Donald Trump and say that Hillary Clinton would have done the same thing. You can argue about that in the comment section. I'm not going to let that ride on my show. But the fact of the matter is why would a white supremacist Nazi use Jimmy Dore's clip co-opting the message of Malcolm X? It's because the Republican Party has pushed a full court press. And when I say Republicans, don't think Mitt Romney. The Republican Party is fully owned by Donald Trump at this point, by white supremacists, by the most extreme elements in our country. And they have a full court press trying to buy as many black votes as they can or to encourage self-disenfranchisement. And that is not a victory. That is not a victory for progress for anyone, even if you feel like the Democratic Party hasn't done anything for black folks, which arguably they haven't. The one thing that they have not done is elevated white supremacy to the point that Donald Trump has in this last year. Listen, does that matter? It absolutely matters. When they champion the Confederacy, when they champion monuments to white supremacy, when they champion not only those things, but economic policies that are detrimental to the black community. When the last thing that they're going to do is to give us Medicare for all, or college for all, or anything that's beneficial. The last thing that these folks are going to do is give us reparations. And so whereas with the Democratic Party, we have the fight of our lives, we absolutely have to fight tooth and nail just to get anything from the Democratic Party. Don't have any misconception whatsoever about that. And that's the fault of the Democratic Party. But so too, don't be fooled by this idea that your lack of political participation or sitting out is somehow going to change something. Sitting out never changes anything. If you don't think voting changes anything, you sure as hell should know not voting won't change anything. And if it's actual tangible benefits that you want, then you cannot deny that we are in a position now with conversations about Medicare for all, with the push for college for all, with the push to cancel student debt, These are conversations that will irrevocably change this country for the better in a tangible, material way. And the only thing Republicans have in their arsenal right now to stop us is to encourage self-disenfranchisement in the black community. That is literally the only reason you would see a white supremacist Nazi like Richard Spencer sharing a clip of Malcolm X saying what he said. Peep game, folks. You got to peep game.
Pretty white TT, pretty white TT, pretty white TT, pretty white TT, pretty white TT.
Okay, like I mentioned at the top of the show, Kamala Harris is out, according to Politico and NPR. She informed her team this afternoon on a call saying that she did not have the financial resources needed to compete for the presidential nomination. So Kamala is out. This doesn't really change the game much because she never really polled. I don't think she polled over 6%. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong. It doesn't change. The real question is, where does her endorsement go and how much does her endorsement carry? How much weight does it carry? I went over earlier in the show information about the polling, and you saw she was at the bottom of the polls. And here's something to keep in mind for all of the Tulsi fans. No, let me start that again. For all of the Bernie supporters who think Tulsi is their colleague, who are celebrating this, Kamala wasn't the threat to Bernie. Tulsi is the threat to Bernie. So I'm glad, though. I am extremely glad that the field is starting to thin out because we don't need another debate with 20 people on the stage whatsoever. And we're getting closer. I think we're 2 months out of Iowa. It's time for the race to really go down to about 5 people. Honestly, 2 people. We need to get to the point where it is a question of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Then you hit with Elizabeth Warren. I'm sorry. For all the people in my audience who like Elizabeth Warren, I'm sorry. I'm going to try to tote fair. But the reason I want the race to come down to those 2 is because that would be a competition of ideas and not a competition of establishment versus progressives. So anyway, Kamala Harris is out. I don't think it shakes up a whole lot because she wasn't carrying a lot of weight, but we will see what kind of weight, if any, her endorsement carries. And the rest will be left up to the organizers and the campaigns that are still in there. Have a great day, everyone. See you next time.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.